Now, I mentioned earlier that we would talk about the phrase visitation/soul winning. You remember that? Visitation/soul winning. So the next section, the last section in this lesson, in fact, is entitled Visitation or Soul Winning. Visitation or soul winning. Let's go on with your notes, and I'm going to give a personal example, and I'm sure you probably have some as well. Visitation or soul winning. It is possible for many Christians and churches to get into a regular visitation program without doing any, fill in the blanks, without doing any personal soul winning. Without doing any personal soul winning. This happens when people begin to, fill this out now, this happens when people begin to visit absentees, contact those who have visited the church, etc., and merely give an invitation to return. Invitation to return to the services. Most of the time, now listen closely, listen, don't get confused. Most of the time this happens because people have not been trained in a definite plan. Most of the time this happens because people have not been trained in a definite plan. The pastor should make sure, or the director should make sure, that he distinguishes for the soul winning club as well as his church family the difference between visitation and soul winning. Of course, visitation is needed too. But if personal soul winning is neglected, the soul winning fervor, F-E-R-V-O-R, the soul winning fervor and ministry of the church will be almost non-existent. Non-existent. Let me give you a personal illustration. In my father's church, many, many years ago, there was a gentleman, and he was a wonderful Christian man, one of the best friends we've ever had. But he would go out on soul-winning visitation, and he would never, ever lead anyone to Christ. Never. I mean, he went out every week as faithful as anybody else and never won anybody to Christ. Well, my father, as the pastor of the church, was very concerned about this because he had been trained and he had been sent out and he was going out regularly, just like everybody else, and other folks were seeing people saved and bringing their new converts to church and getting them baptized, and this particular gentleman wasn't seeing that. So my father took it upon himself. One night he said, "Brother," he said, "why don't you and I go out tonight together?" And the gentleman said, "Well, that'd be great, preacher, let's go." And so they left, and as they left the church, this fellow was about 60, 65 years old, wonderful man. As they left the church, they went over to a nursing home. And they stopped, and they got out, and they visited for about 35 or 40 minutes with one of the ladies in the church who hadn't been able to come to church for the past several months because she's been in the nursing home. So they left there, and they went over to someone else's house. This was the home of a shut-in. And one of the ladies and her husband were living there, and they'd kind of gotten sick, and they were elderly people and just sweet people in the church. And they spent another 30 or 40 minutes with them and had some cake and had a cup of coffee and spent time. They went from there over to a fella who was a part of this gentleman's Sunday school class, and he had missed the previous week, and he wanted to do some follow-up work with him and make sure everything was all right and meet his needs. And they spent a few minutes there, and I think they had a half a piece of pie because that's probably all they could eat at that point, and maybe a cup of coffee again. And they left, came back to church. And this gentleman looked at my father and said, "See, I don't understand why I'm not getting anybody saved when I'm out on soul-winning visitation." And my father looked at him and said, "Well, brother," he said, "you're not out on soul-winning visitation. You're out on visitation." See the difference? He's out doing some visiting work. Now, don't get me wrong. Please do not misunderstand me. Don't think for a minute that I don't believe in visiting nursing homes. Don't think for a minute that I don't believe in visiting shut-ins. Don't think for a minute that I don't believe in making a home visit or a personal contact from someone that's been missing from a Sunday school class. Man, that is important. That's visitation. But we're talking about soul winning. Soul winning, where you get out where people are lost, and you get out where people need to hear the gospel perhaps for the first time, and you present the gospel, you make a clear presentation, and you give that person a chance to receive Christ as their personal Savior. Visitation or soul winning. That's why, my friend, that the soul winning fervor and ministry of most churches is almost non-existent. The pastor and the outreach leader and the lay people, we have bought into this fact that all we need to do is follow up on our people who've gotten sick, and follow up on people in the hospital, and follow up on those who've been missing from Sunday school for a week or two. And all that's well and good. This visitation needs to take place. But please, let's not let this visitation ministry, let's not let this replace the soul-winning fervor of our local churches. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. May God bless you.